I'm going to give you an example. So depending on different organizations, I sort of work on these in different ways, but so I'm going to give you an example here. This is quite a full example. There's lots, I'll show you a number of different types of engagement networks that help with implementing change and leveraging social influence. But first, what I'm going to put up here are the network groups that normally happen in organizations. So usually there's an executive sponsor, right? Which is great, really important. And at a very high level, they're saying they support it. Maybe they're sending out a communication about it, right? They're trying to get people on board. Great. But the only other network group that usually exists are champions. So, and champions are amazing. I love working with champions groups. I've just had brilliant people over the years to work with. They're keen, they're passionate about what they're doing. They're really helpful, brilliant. But the problem is that champions only have so much authority and influence to influence upwards. So so they can do a lot of brilliant work, but if there's too big of a gap between the champions trying to, implement change or make things better, and then the next level of support is executive sponsor, it's really tricky because executive sponsors generally aren't involved in what's happening organizationally. So I'm going to now go through some layers that I like to add in. And again, like I said, different organizations, it sort of looks a bit different, but because, whatever makes sense for your context. But here are some layers I like to add in. So ambassadors groups are senior managers who are, well, we all care about what our boss or line manager cares about, right? So having that extra layer of senior managers in there who are basically like senior manager champions. So they're to influence other senior managers and also to ensure that in their area that this change is being communicated, understood, and implemented. So there's that extra layer of ensuring that these things are being implemented operationally. Advisory group can be a really useful tool. So when you have, so often a change is happening and you'll have people who are really keen and interested, and maybe they don't want to be a champion. That's too much of a time commitment, or whatever the challenge may be for them. This allows them to have like a lower time commitment role, but to still be involved. And you can also really cherry pick people from across the business to ensure, that things are aligned. If what you're doing is, being impacted by something else that's being delivered, or that, key areas are being considered, if you want to include ED&I, for example, or, whatever that may look like. So you can handpick people, you can invite people who are really interested to be involved. And the other reason this group is super useful is that if you end up with someone who is being, I call them squeaky wheels. So they're giving feedback, but it's in a very unconstructive way, perhaps, or it's really negative, like they seem angry or, whatever. I will often reach out because I always thank everyone for any feedback that they take time to give, because I think that's important. And so I'll usually reach out and I'll say, thank you so much for taking the time to feed this back to me. We actually have an advisory group and you're obviously really knowledgeable and passionate about this, and we would love for you to join our advisory group. And every single time we sort of have changed the narrative from someone being really challenging to being an ally and actually really helping us a lot. It has worked brilliantly over the years. So that's a group that's really helpful. Line managers. So when you're implementing change and as an employee, you're not sure what's going on, the first person you go to is your line manager. And line managers are also the gatekeepers to what happens locally and what happens in their team. So ensuring that line managers are always know what's going on, what are the key things that their staff need to know, and where they can get support, really key. I'll often, for example, send out like line manager briefings, just really short, but just so the line managers know what's going on. And I send them out before the change happens. Before I put out any communication, I just make sure that line managers know what's going on. They have time to ask questions, and that they feel confident, because when their team comes to them and asks them about this big change that's happening, they don't know what's going on. It's just not a great situation for them or for the change that's happening. And then the last one, I put employees, but this is just the idea, in terms of our last session in January around planning for 100% engagement, to ensure that we're thinking through all the different groups and how we can best use them as advocates. For example, like even if they're really light touch, how do we ensure that everyone can be advocates for change as well? So I just added that in there as well. So hopefully all of that makes sense. And you don't need this many groups, but it's just thinking through what's happening, what are the challenges, and what would, work best in your organization.